So I have been nonstop glued to my phone over the New York upset. I've been watching and reading all like of Jeffrey's responses. He's a little upset at Mom Donnie to, what are you doing, man? You're in our stuff. You're supposed to let the status quo do their thing. And that didn't happen. Mom Donnie went 3-4-3 in New York. And I'm wondering, I want to get your take on that, but I also want to know, do you think that this is an isolated incident, or is this gonna be kind of a common spread throughout the United States this year?
Yeah, I mean, people are sick and tired of the do-nothing Democrats. They are saying, we want people who are actually going to come to Washington and fight for the people. And that's exactly what we saw, not just this past Tuesday, but in a number of elections that have already happened. I mean, thinking back even, just like a number of weeks ago to the California races, I mean, there were a number of races there that actually went the way of the progressive challenger. And that is the fact that we need to keep looking at, even here in New Hampshire, where I have been the leader with independents, people who didn't vote in previous elections, and we're even pulling Republicans into our coalition. Because at the end of the day, we are providing a different type of solution to the problems that we're facing. Because the Democrats in Washington, they like to point out at all these different problems, but they never provide a solution. And that's where the candidates like Mom Donnie have actually done the work. And we've already been seeing it. The fact that he reduced a $12 billion deficit in their budget, that is massive. The fact that he was given that and basically said, all right, we're going to let him fail. And he succeeded. The fact that he's out fixing potholes in the street, it's massive.
The dude looked great in Nick's jersey too.
Oh, that's true. That's true. And I mean, I guess voting for these progressives leads to certain sports championships too.
Yeah, I think everybody's really excited about Mom Donnie. Yep. I mean, I know that the right is not. If you're MAGA, you're probably super scared, right, to have somebody that's not white in charge. I mean, that's scary. But I think a lot of the people are really excited about this. They're seeing change for the first time. I mean, all my life, I've been in the military and I've watched them all just status quo me, Yep. Oh, I almost said Cuomo there, but my point is, like, when the Afghanistan war kicked off, for example, everybody just lined up and said, yeah, of course, send them. Yeah. Send them. Who cares? To finally see progressives actually dig in and win. I've been told my whole life progressives can't win.
Yep.
Brad Lander, he is somebody that's incredible too, because we watched him get locked up for the whole ICE protest, right, at the courthouse. And then he's been going through his whole thing. He is Jewish as well.
Yes.
And he won.
Yeah.
He won by a landslide, if I remember.
Yeah. He won. It was like 2/3 of the vote. And I mean, it's the fact that you couldn't have seen a more contrasting election result right there, because the biggest issue was ultimately down to the issue of the war in Gaza and what's happening in our foreign policy. Because at the end of the day, we as Americans are funding things like genocide abroad, and that's not appropriate. And people like Brad Lander, people like Zoran Mamdani have stepped up and said, no, that's not appropriate. And as Americans, we should demand more from our leaders, and our leaders should take moral stances.
I fully agree with that. Like, everybody wants to live. Everybody wants to live the American dream. They want to own a house. They want to have a nice paying job. They want a little bit of school in their background. These aren't outrageous things. Yeah. But for some reason, we've been told that it is outrageous. We can't afford them. We can't do this. We can't do that. It's probably one of the most un-American things I've ever heard. The fact that you can tell Americans we can't do this. I think of World War II when I think of that, where we had to shift our whole country to produce war assets.
Yeah.
That was probably a huge hill for a lot of Americans back then. Yeah. And yet we did it.
Yeah.
America is something to be reckoned with, but not when we have this kind of leadership.
Yeah.
So seeing New York's a little bit more of a progressive bastion though, right? Because we have AOC there. You got Mom Donnie there now. And I'm sure there's more names.
But it's also, got to remember, it's the capital of finance. And so when you look at it from that lens, it's not necessarily always a progressive place because you have billions, trillions of dollars flowing through that city. And that's where we have to look at the fact that people matter more than the finances that we are looking at. People matter more than profit. And that is something that has resonated in New York. That is something that has resonated in multiple states around the country. And I think that's something that's resonating here in New Hampshire.
Really? You think New Hampshire? Somebody was saying on Reddit, and I talked to on the last episode a little bit about they were hoping that we had our own Plattner.
Yep.
And I understand that Plattner to half the country or whatever the percentage is like radioactive. But for people like me, I get excited about that.
Yeah.
Here I am supporting or wanting to support a working person to go and represent us. I mean, I'm not in Maine, so it's not the thing. But New Hampshire is really a weird place. And I've lived here about 8 years now, 8.5. This is probably one of the reddest states that I've lived in.
Yep.
Because you feel it. Unlike Georgia, I lived in Georgia, I lived in North Carolina. This state's so small that you feel the status quo.
Yeah.
And you can't really dodge it. And I just feel like, I don't feel like New Hampshire's going to win the progressive vote this year. I don't know if I'm being a naysayer or anything, but New York and New Hampshire are two very different places.
They are. But like you said, Maine is not New York. And in the same type of vein, I'm not necessarily a Mamdani replica. I'm not a copy.
Sure.
I'm completely different in the fact that I approach, issues in a fashion that is focused on New Hampshire. And I think that that's where we have to be focused, because when we're talking about how, a number of these other races have gone, it is about the people who support the local interests. And that's who ends up winning. That's what my campaign has been focused on, and it doesn't matter. The thing is people forget, New Hampshire voted for Bernie Sanders twice.
Yeah.
2016 and 2020, they voted for Bernie Sanders.
You got screwed both times.
And part of it is we have an establishment in this state that does not want progressives. That's the thing. They've squashed it.
Why? Like, honestly, in your opinion, what's holding progressives back?
Well, it's partially, as I mentioned earlier, the do-nothing Democrats who are in charge of the establishment. Because rather than providing solutions, they're just sitting on power because they find it easier to run elections by saying, we're not the other guy. We're not Republicans. The Republicans are destroying the country. And instead of providing real solutions, they're just saying, here are the problems. We're not the other guy. That is where we have to change the mentality. We have to actually provide solutions for real issues. And the fact of the matter is we're able to pull Republicans into our coalition, not because we're running on the fact that I'm a Democrat, but it's because we're approaching these problems in a unique way that will actually solve the issue for the locals, not necessarily for the wealthy outside donors. And that's where a lot of the do-nothing Democrats are spending their time. Talking to the donor class, talking to the people who are the wealthiest in this country rather than the people who actually matter.
No, I fully agree. Just a little bit of a tangent, but I was, before we sat down here, before you came over, I was looking on Facebook. I know it's a really bad place, but unfortunately for New Hampshire and Maine, that's where a lot of the activity gets taken, or it's active.
Yes.
And I was being shown Bobby Charles posts from Maine. And it's probably because we're right on the border, geographically it makes sense. That dude, all he did was say what everybody else is doing wrong. He has, I've watched his platform a little bit, but he hasn't said a single thing in his ads that he wants to do. Just what other people are doing that he's against.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, where do you spend most of your time? Attacking others or telling people what you're going to do?
It's mostly spent on what I'm going to do. I mean, I have been talking to people about the solutions that I'm planning on bringing with me. And, I was at a candidate forum the other day, and I had somebody come up to me afterwards, and they were like, I heard a lot of people complaining and pointing out a lot of issues, not a whole lot of solutions. And I asked him how I did, and he said, came with quite a few solutions. And I think that kind of exemplifies where we're focused, because a lot of people are able to identify the problems. It's the fact that we need people who are able to identify the solutions that we need.
Yeah. And I even hate the labels of like progressive, Democrat, stuff like that, because it's really about just what you're going to do, right? I don't want to be put into a pocket like, oh, these are the people you belong to. Like, no, this is just what everybody should want, right?
Yep.
I should want to see a doctor, without any kind of bureaucracy or anything like that. Or, simple things like keeping my kids in New Hampshire. Because I don't want them to leave. I say this on almost every episode, but it's so important to me. Yeah. And I hope that anybody that's watching would feel the same.
Yeah. And I hear you. I mean, young people in this state have been treated in such a toxic fashion, which I think that's partially why when you talk about how New Hampshire feels Republican, it's like, yeah, we do, because we are actively toxic towards a lot of people that we basically are saying, oh, we don't want you here. And young people are especially a victim to that. We have the highest in-state tuition anywhere in the country. We are constantly defunding our public schools. I mean, businesses are moving out of the state rather, than what the Republicans might say of, oh, we had, this business from Massachusetts come over the border. It's like, well, when you have companies like Budweiser shutting down their distillery in Merrimack, losing, 200 plus jobs, the most expensive thing for them is the infrastructure, which already existed. We also have the lowest labor costs in New England, which, that's a factor. We also had the lowest business costs anywhere in New England. And on top of that, they're also trying to support states that haven't legalized cannabis, like New Hampshire. So the alcohol industry is actively trying to put money into states like ours. So it's the question of, why did it shut down? Because they can't find the labor. They can't find the workforce. And that is where we have to change how we approach certain policy proposals so that we can actually make it affordable for young families and young people to stay here, get the education that they need, make sure that they can pursue different jobs. And when we look at the problem that this poses, if you have companies moving out of the state because they can't find labor, all of a sudden that means that those families can't put food on the table, which means they might leave. And that's one of the things that we are seeing. Young families leave the state. And with young families, working class individuals leaving, with businesses leaving, we are seeing a downshift of property taxes onto especially fixed income seniors. And I think that they're feeling it especially because we are seeing this downshifting be expedited by Republican policies in Concord. But that's where we have to change how we approach Democrats in terms of the primary elections, like we've already talked about, make sure that we get rid of these do-nothing Democrats and actually proceed forward with policies that will actually fix the problems that our constituents are facing.
I just want to tax the rich. I just want my 90% tax rate back from 1950s. I just get upset. I mean, this is an aside, but, just knowing that there's so many billionaires and millionaires and, was a trillionaire, that's upsetting. I've busted my ass my whole life. I've lived around the world. I've put my life on the line, just like so many others. And to come home and just realize there's just nothing because all the rich took it all is upsetting. Anyway, I don't want to go too far into that. I want to point something out, another tangent here. Maybe some people will appreciate this. And I also want to get your take on it. But I was reading, again, some Facebook this morning. I like to read some of the candidates' posts, and I was reading pages from CD2 or not CD2. I don't know.
No, it's CD2.
Is it CD2? Okay, so CD2. And somebody was in there complaining about people moving in from out of state. And it clicked. For some reason, it just clicked. Not only are they scared of immigrants taking their job, taking their houses, taking whatever it is, right? Yep. But they're also scared of immigrants from outside the state. I'm from outside the state. There's a lot of people outside the state. I mean, how do you like have that knowledge on a border that's so small? New England's tiny. We just have a lot of people. So the thought of like somebody moving from Mass, Connecticut, Rhode Island into New Hampshire, I would say it's pretty likely.
Yeah. I mean, I think the problem is that like, for me, I would say if somebody is moving here specifically to run for office.
Okay, that's not what I'm getting at, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
Because, we have people, like, somebody from New York who, hasn't necessarily lived here in a while. We've got people who, are from Illinois and are running here. And it's just like, that's your right to do so. But at the end of the day, I do think that we need to be represented by the people who actually are facing the problems here.
Fully agree. I want somebody that's going to go to Washington that lives the life I live.
Yeah. But in terms of the other aspect, I do think that the Free State movement in particular has created this certain dynamic where people are very afraid of out-of-staters, and they're very wary of that. I mean, New England as a whole has generally been a place where, you take care of your own. And that comes back to, some historical aspects of, how you take care of people in your community, and your community is supposed to take care of those people, not somebody else's community. And, this comes back to like, colonial times and in a lot of ways. But because of how our government has been targeted by these free staters, where they just want to move 20,000 people here so that they can take over that's what they've said.
No, I'm just kidding.
I think that, you need a few more people than that, but, I'm not.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I'm starting to worry that you don't need that many people.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, how many they've like moved here.
Yeah.
And I mean, they do have control of the state Republican Party. And I think that is somewhat scary to people, especially when they look at how the state is being run and how it's not necessarily a New Hampshire tradition.
Yeah, I don't think it is. And I think that the most people that are moving here from like Mass and the other states are Republicans. Since I moved here in 2018, when I first looked at places to go live, because I had retired from the Air Force and I could have picked anywhere, I had picked Washington, Colorado, New Mexico, and I had not considered New England. But then I had family here and I was like, you know what, let me check this out. And I came here. But I'm not a Republican, and I don't think a lot of non-Republicans do move here, not at the same rate. Because most Republicans in Mass, for example, they're like, oh, I'm not paying these taxes. This is garbage. I'm going across the border to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And the reality is we're just pulling more Republicans than we are anything else in this state. So when I hear people say, oh, don't mass it up, and I'm talking to you, Kelly, talking to you, you're lying. You're lying because they're massing it up for Republicans, not for us.
Exactly.
Otherwise, we wouldn't go more red every single election since 2018.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and this is my fear about, nominating a very lukewarm slate of do-nothing Democrats. If we don't have any bit of excitement, we will lose this upcoming election. And I say that because people are not motivated to come out for Democrats. We saw this in 2016. We saw this in 2024. If we do the same thing again in 2026, we will lose. And you can thank the do-nothing Democrats for
I hate it. I hate every bit of this.
I don't like saying that, but it's the truth.
I get it.
It's the fact that people without any sort of motivation, they're going to come out and vote for the Republicans. But the Trump administration has an advantage because of our state, and that should not necessarily be the case. We have had the most Republican-aligned delegation in Washington, and that, I think, is a very big problem when we're talking about how New Hampshire is been used already by the Trump administration to affect all of New England, because we're basically how they're able to exact his agenda.
Which is sad. We have to fix that. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Overall, I think New York, for me personally, is like a green light, and I'm hoping that the rest of New England will kind of follow. There's so many politicians I want to see get primaried out. I know it's not going to happen to the degree that I would like it to, but we need change. We need real change in this country.
Yeah. Because
if we continue, we are going to be bankrupt as a country. We're looking at our national debt. We are going to be controlled completely by authoritarians. And I'm thinking a lot about, the Republicans literally own the White House, both chambers of Congress, the Supreme Court, the head of every agency is some wild off the rails MAGA or Trump's buddy or a billionaire. There's nobody representing us. And I want to switch gears just slightly to the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Now, I've asked this question a couple times. I don't know how we fix it. The fact that Trump got 3 seats, the fact that Obama basically got screwed out of 2 seats, you can go back and forth. That's not what this debate is. This morning, just a few minutes ago before we started, it was announced that the U.S. Supreme Court just basically nixed thousands of lawsuits against the maker of Roundup, the cancer-causing weed killer. There are so many people that have died, will die, and because of capitalism and the Supreme Court, now they just have free reign to do what they want to do.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know how we get back if we can just civilly sue them out of existence. I don't know where you go because once the Supreme Court rules, that's it. I guess let's start with this. How do we reform it? I know that people have talked about adding seats, but I feel like that just can go both ways, right?
It does.
Or impeachment. Do we remove some of these justices? I know that there's the ethics. There's different ways to do it. But from your point of view, what's our way forward?
Well, I think that, when we're talking about this, like many of the issues with within the federal government, it's a multifaceted problem that we need to, make sure that there are limits on how long these justices can serve. I think that, one of the things that we do here in New Hampshire is we do have an age limit. So it does mean something where if you're once you hit 70 years old, you can no longer be on the Supreme Court. One of the representatives in the House has been trying to change that. I disagree with him, but
we just had the ballot initiative trying to move it to 75 and it lost.
Yes, exactly. And they phrased it as though we're setting a limit, but it's raising it 5 years.
It was very confusing.
Well, yeah, and that was done on purpose.
Sure.
But we have to, set age limits, I think. We need to make sure that they follow certain ethics standards because every other lower court has certain ethics standards that they have to follow. And if we're not necessarily implementing ethics for the highest court in the land, can we really trust them to make non-partisan and non-biased decisions?
No, I think that the Supreme Court has lost all legitimacy at this point.
It has.
I don't think anybody's tuned in saying, hell yeah.
And that's also why we do need to impeach certain people like Clarence Thomas, who have clearly abused their position. The fact that Harlan Crow has been giving him, massive amounts of money, vacations, paying for his mom's home. There are so many points of error that we can point to and say, this should not have happened, that we need to remove him. If we want to restore faith in the courts, we have to get rid of these people.
Well, I think him, Alito, it's easy for me to just say remove all the conservatives, but I don't necessarily think that that's the way forward because I don't want America just to be in the eyes of me. Yeah. That's what makes us great. The fact that we all have competing ideas.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think that some of the conservative justices on the Supreme Court currently, they have made fine decisions in the past that I don't necessarily fully agree with.
Yeah.
But they're justifiable in the positions that they took. And I find it problematic, though, that those decisions can be brought into question because of the ethical concerns that we have seen by some of the members.
They've been absolutely crazy. I don't see somebody like Thomas and Alito in particular. I don't want them to just be term limited. Yeah. I want them to be in prison. I want all of their ill-gotten funds to be clawed back. Now that's just me as an American. I'm not running for any office. I have no say in this, but just as a voter, I want to know that we can get back to where we should have been in the first place and that these family lines are not going to continue to pass on generational wealth because of what previous family members did. It hurt us all.
It did.
And it will continue. I think back just to Gore versus Bush and how detrimental that decision was of the hanging Chad. We spent $20 trillion going overseas and dropping bombs for 20 years.
Yep.
And here we are again.
Yeah.
So the Supreme Court to me is huge, but I don't want it to be expanded.
No, I don't think that we need to expand the Supreme Court. I don't think that that would be a way of solving the problem. It just prolongs the problem and says, I'll one-up you this time.
Yeah.
And then as soon as Republicans get control, they're just going to add more justices themselves. I think that it sets a poor precedent. And that's where, I mean, when we're talking about the Supreme Court, precedent is everything.
Absolutely.
And we need to make sure that the precedents that we are setting are ones that we can follow and feel good about going forward.
No, I agree. I know we have a primary in like 2 months, and we'll know your fate soon and everybody else's fate that's, in a primary. I'm just hoping internally that we send somebody with progressive values that wants to do the job, that wants to get in there and say, let's make America better. And I'm nervous. I'm a little nervous. I see New York, so that's a little confusing. I see Maine. That's a little confusing because it's not the norm. I don't know if we have any other primaries that we're going to be looking forward to. I mean, we do. I know that. But I'm saying like in the immediate future, like New York just happened. I don't think we have anything next week.
June 30th, I believe, is the next one where it will be Colorado. Colorado's first district has a competitive race between Diana DeGette and Malat Quiros. And so that will be an interesting one to watch because Diana DeGette has served the Denver area for about the past 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And so it's a situation where you have another DSA-backed candidate running, challenging an incumbent. And in the polls, they've been neck and neck. So it is very competitive. And I think that with what we just saw in New York and a lot of the momentum that's growing, I think that we're going to probably see another very clear result for progressive Democrats.
Really? Do you think we're going to see this just across the U.S. or in isolated pockets?
I think that it's going to be in places across the U.S. Obviously, it's going to be dependent on the districts, but it's a situation where this is a movement that we are seeing not just in one place, but across the entire country. And it feels very similar to the Tea Party movement in 2012, where incumbent Republicans just got ousted.
I remember very distinctly.
Yeah. And so I do think that we have an opportunity here to make waves and make a difference.
I don't know why, but I am so looking forward to what happens in Florida and Texas.
Oh, yeah.
The dummy mandering that they've done is going to pay us dividends. I firmly believe. Yeah, here, let's get you some more.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that.
I think Florida is making a huge mistake. So for people that don't know, Florida Supreme Court just okayed their dummy mandering, and it's in their constitution. So I don't understand how their Supreme Court says, "Oh yeah, even though our constitution says that, you guys just go ahead," But yeah. I have a little bit of hope because a friend of ours, Maxwell Frost, he's going to go uncontested.
Yeah. So in terms of the dummy mandering, though, this is another problem. The courts actually, especially, the Supreme Courts at the state level, do not work. Right. They do not. And we've experienced this here in New Hampshire firsthand. Over the past 30 years, we have had several court cases from the Claremont decision, all the way up to the Rand case, where schools need to be funded by the state. We need to fund them to an adequate level. And we are not doing that. That has been determined over and over and over again. In the state legislature, every single time they look at the Supreme Court order, they say, that's a good one. Throw it in the trash.
Yeah.
And that's where all of these things keep ending up. And it's very similar to what happened in Florida, I feel, because it was very clear. I mean, they had a nonpartisan redistricting amendment in their constitution. And the Supreme Court said, who gives a damn?
Yeah, you guys just do whatever you want.
Just do whatever you want. And that is exactly what has happened in New Hampshire with these school funding cases. We've said, all right, you need to fund them. Who cares? I mean, even more recently, the YDC settlement, the Sununu Center, the Youth Detention Center. We had a Supreme Court settlement that said that we had to pay out, it was like $125 million or something.
Yeah, it was a lot of money.
It was, I might be wrong about that number, but it was a significant chunk of change. And the state is the one who's responsible and is on the hook. We are also planning right now on selling the youth detention center land and facility. Thing is that we had an opportunity to put that money into a separate fund for those victims, like we should have, because that's what the Supreme Court said that we should do.
Yeah.
What ended up happening? We're putting that money into the general fund.
Well, doesn't that happen because the courts really don't have any teeth? While they're a separate branch.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Checks and balances are supposed to have control over one another.
Yeah.
This is why at times it feels like the legislative branch can't do anything because the courts overturn their ruling. So it's subjective as to when they actually have teeth and when they don't. And in terms of a number of these efforts, they have chosen, we're not going to have teeth because it's politically inexpedient for us. So rather than actually proceed forward and do the right thing and follow the Constitution, they're saying, let's do the politically expedient thing and not pressure it too much. So we'll let the case come back in front of us yet again, and we'll have the same ruling, and we won't do anything to enforce it.
The way they rule is so insidious. It's just they carve out things that are exceptions that shouldn't be. They rule really awful. I've never witnessed such rulings. And that's why I say I don't believe that they're legitimate. I believe it's an illegitimate court. I think most of America probably feels that way, except for 30% of the electorate, because you can never change their mind. It's frustrating. Something that's been a theme that I've talked to a lot of people running for office. Some people have access. Some people don't. I don't know if you saw it. I talked to Krishma on the last episode, and she's one of those that seems not to have a lot of access. She seems to be boxed out and stuff like that. And I want to just ask you, do you experience that at all in your campaign? Like, how, and like, if you want to talk about it, you don't have to, obviously. But
for sure. I mean, the New Hampshire State Democratic Party, for example, they charge the highest amount for access to the voter file of any Democratic Party anywhere in the country. They will charge $75,000 for the statewide, $37.5 for just one district. And
wait, does that matter before a primary or after a primary, or is it just 70,000 across the board?
It's for the primary. Cindy Warmington, I don't think has to pay that because she doesn't have a competitor.
She doesn't have a competitor.
So she's the nominee, so she gets it no matter what. And so it's a situation where for specifically people who are on the lower income side, it makes it very difficult for them to even afford access to the voter file. I don't even have access to the Democratic voter file. What I have access to is a third-party software that costs me $100 a month for pretty much the same exact type of data.
What would that list help you do as a candidate?
It would provide me with phone numbers. That's the big thing. The phone numbers and emails are on there that allows you to just call through as many people as possible. And that is the real advantage that a lot of these campaigns have. For us, we have fewer phone numbers and, maybe a little bit more dated data. So it's a little bit more difficult in that regard, but it's the fact that it's set up in a way where it's difficult if you're a progressive challenger.
So the party puts a high price on it, boxes out a lot of the lower income candidates and stuff like that. And I know you come from a blue collar background, your dad, your mom, like the whole thing. So that's got to be a little frustrating.
It is, but I mean, especially when you look at California and it costs $200 for the same access that I would need from their state party.
Why do you think they charge that much?
Why? Because it's so that they can protect establishment candidates. It's the do-nothing Democrats who are in control of the state party. The do-nothing Democrats who are the ones who can afford to pay the $75,000 because they're the ones who are often the ones in the party that are a little bit wealthier. And I don't think that we should necessarily adhere to establishment politicians and rules because that's the standard.
I'm so tired of voting in millionaires and people with money and people that just want to collect power. Again, I'm not running for office. I don't have any incentive here. I pay my taxes. I show up when I need to. I'm just trying to live my life. And I just want somebody to go to Washington. I said this earlier too, that represents me and my family.
Yep.
So I get excited when there's working class candidates. Yep. I don't think money, I mean, I know money allows people to buy ads and really get in front of people, but man, I hope Americans can see through this for 26. I am not voting, at least in the primary. I mean, if I'll recheck myself in the general when we get there, but I'm not voting for AIPAC money, and neither is any of my family. So so there's at least a handful of votes that aren't going to go to AIPAC candidates. I don't think that they're bad people. I just don't want my votes to kill other people around the planet. Yeah. And I realized I did 20 years in the military, but that wasn't so I could kill people. Yeah. That was so I could serve my country and hopefully do good things with it. Yeah. And it just feels bad. It feels bad right now because I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up watching a bunch of movies about like World War II, right? Yeah. And you watch these stories about the Americans being the heroes, defeating the Nazis, preventing, people from dying in a genocide. And then here we are, modern day, and we're the ones funding the genocide. We're the ones who are saying, oh, it's fine, don't worry about it, while there are mass atrocities happening. And it's like, where are those Americans? Where are those leaders? Because I think that the people, they're still under the belief that, genocide's wrong. And it's the fact that the leaders are the ones who have changed. And that's where we need to have a different type of mentality.
Yeah, we need new leaders. I'm going to ask you a little bit of a contentious question. I hope you don't mind this.
You're good.
And I just want to say, this is hypothetical. I'm not looking for any trouble here, but USAID was cut a lot, like 80%, just chainsawed, if I will, because that's what Elon did. He literally went on stage with a chainsaw. And lately there has been stuff coming out saying, up to 14, 15 million people will die because of these cuts. And even in some of those, all the way up to 22, 23 million people. I think we had, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head, but 6, 7 million Jews were killed in World War II.
Yes, correct.
Right? I may, if I'm a little balling that, I apologize. I'm just trying to get my thoughts here. But how will history remember somebody that potentially killed 14 to 22 million people just to save some money versus somebody that just our bad leaders, Mussolini, Stalin, Hitler, killed millions and millions of people. But this USA cut is almost right there with it. Yeah. And I don't know how many people are talking about that and how history will remember this. Will Elon, I'm going to ask this question. Would Elon be remembered in that vein because of the way he did this? He funded this administration. They won. He made all the cuts. All these people around the world will die, up to 5 million kids. But that was because of him. Tell me that he gets remembered in history as this person.
No, because at the same end, I don't know if you remember a tweet from a few years ago where somebody said, we could solve world hunger with only I forget exactly what the
it might have been like 60 billion. It was something small.
And for him, I think still a lot of money there.
Oh, no, it's a ton of money. But I'm just saying from a government or a trillionaire's point of view, 60 billion is really not.
Yeah, it's a fraction. Yeah. And so for that, it was something that he could have done personally, not even, looking at these USAID cuts. He could have personally taken money out of his wallet, said, I'll put my money where my mouth is, because he had doubled down on that. And it was just like this whole thing where, Elon's going to, save so many people. And it was like this PR thing. But when you look at it now, it's like he could have ended world hunger and instead chose to advocate for the cuts of USAID, which not only killed, as you said, it's millions of people at this point where they're not necessarily getting access to food, and we're actually creating famines. However, I will say, it's also done a huge amount of damage to our economy.
Yes.
Because when we look at the farmers who have been affected, that has been extremely damaging. And when you have conversations with people like soybean farmers who then go to President Trump and say, what are we going to do? And he's like, oh, don't worry about it. And then helps bail out Argentina after they were selling their soybeans to China.
Yeah, we gave them 40 billion, and then after we gave them 40 billion, China boxed out our farmers, and they sold like 20 billion $20 billion worth of soybeans to China.
Yes.
As just for people that don't know.
Exactly. And so that is a situation where we literally took away the paychecks from these farmers and then gave away that money to a foreign government because they are our friends, which I don't think, we should just give money away because they're our friends.
Yeah, we still have to pay for that.
Yeah, we still have to pay for that.
Every American has a tax bill that will consume this.
Exactly. And then on top of that, the largest purchaser that they could have gone to said, no, we're not doing that. We're going to go to the people who you just then gave money to. It's like, you can't look at that any other way than him screwing over the American people in favor for his friends and allies to make off better on our dime.
Do you think the American people at large are seeing this, or do you think mainstream media is doing a really good job at not talking about anything of importance?
I think that most of the American people understand that this is messed up. It's just the fact that they don't necessarily come out and vote because they feel that the Democrats aren't going to do anything. And this is where it's this ratchet effect, where the Democrats, they overpromise and underdeliver. So then people don't feel motivated to come out and vote, because the Republicans then take that ratchet to the right because, the Democrats are coming with us pretty much and, not necessarily doing anything. And so people don't come out and cast a ballot because they're like, what's the point? What's the difference going to be? Democrat or Republican, it's going to end in the same result. And that's the type of mentality that we need to change. And I think that type of mentality is changing, especially when we see a lot of these election results, because the do-nothing Democrats are being vetoed and they're being said, enough.
Yeah, I think people are feeling that. I worry because it's been so many elections. You get your hopes up, and I mean, I can remember in 2008, people really thought, Obama's going to change everything, and he couldn't. He had a super majority the first 2 years, and then the last 6, he was just railroaded by Mitch McConnell and that crew, and he literally could not pass much. So we need epic change. We can't just change the House.
Yeah.
You have to change it all.
You do.
And so I don't know if we can get there, because most people need to have it happen to them first before they're like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah. I mean, people call me naive because it's like, oh, he's going to go in and change Washington.
You're lucky. People call me a communist.
But, when you look at how things have happened, you can't go in with the same mentality expecting something to change. I mean, doing the same thing over and over and over again, that's the definition of insanity.
Yes, it is.
And so that's where I've been trying to come in with a different approach. I mean, I've done the same thing in the state legislature. I mean, how I've talked to people on the doors, how I communicate. And it's the fact that that's how we need to be reaching out to people, because we agree on a whole lot.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
It's just that we need to motivate these people and make them aware as to what's happening.
Yeah. No, I just think that a lot of us are looking for a better future. And I'll say it a million times, and then seeing people come along across the nation, but it's really that Midwest part that I'm worried about. The Midwest seems to be all about that propaganda, the farmers and everything.
Well, I wouldn't be too sure about that. I mean, I'm looking at what's happening in Iowa with the polls that are coming out, and that suggests that we could really flip that seat.
You really think so?
Iowa won their Senate race. I mean, Josh Turek and Ashley Hinson are neck and neck. And I think Josh can pull it off. I mean, as a fellow disabled person, it's really amazing watching somebody, out knocking doors in a wheelchair, being visible in the community, and just kind of what he's bringing. Because it's like, yeah, I can do that too. And so, it's a situation where it's a little bit of a motivator too.
You seem to have your nose completely on the grind wheel. Like, can you give me any nuggets of where like the happy spots are in the US right now for somebody that hasn't gone to a primary, that's just thinking right now, whatever, it's a midterm. What would bring somebody out? Like where are the pockets of happiness?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's going to be a surprise in places like Nebraska too, with Dan Osborne running against Pete Ricketts. I think that that's going to be a very interesting race because, Dan Osborne, independent, ran for Senate last cycle, came fairly close, did better than Kamala Harris did in the state. And I think is going to actually have a very real chance because, again, I don't think that these pro-MAGA Republicans are going to actually play well in the Midwest because of specifically Trump selling out the farmers.
And the cattle is crazy right now.
Yeah.
I think I read something like we're producing 70% less cattle right now in America. That number is enormous if you just think about steakhouses alone.
Exactly. And part of it is because of the economy that Donald Trump has created, and the fact that we have seen prices go up because of his tariffs, because of the war in Iran, because of the fact that we haven't been able to get oil through the Strait of Hormuz. And it's just like all of the things that he has done has made it more expensive for people to buy just basic groceries or, even go out for a meal at a steakhouse.
Yeah, that's crazy. So New York's been pretty positive. Nebraska, Iowa, any other gems?
Minnesota is really good if we're talking about the Midwest. Specifically their Senate race. I'm really excited about Peggy Flanagan. I think that she has a really strong opportunity. She's their current lieutenant governor and running against an incumbent rep. And so it's kind of that another AIPAC versus, anti-genocide. And I think, are going to see an interesting result. Michigan, same thing. I think that, Abdul El-Sayed in the Senate race is going to overperform, especially as we've seen a number of polls show that he's actually growing his lead quite significantly. But we are, I think, seeing a number of opportunities. I mean, North Carolina, even with Roy Cooper running for U.S. Senate, like that has a huge chance to actually go our way. And even still, people forget exactly how gerrymandered North Carolina is. There are a lot of competitive seats in that state, and we could pick up a number because of how they're gerrymandered.
I mean, it went pretty blue not that long ago, right?
Again, they're actually a very purple state, similar to New Hampshire, but the difference is that they are extremely gerrymandered. I mean, despite them being about 50-50, Democrats have a slight majority. They've been growing, and the Democratic majority has kind of been swinging that way. But they have a Republican supermajority in their House and their Senate, and have been able to push through these gerrymandered maps despite the veto of the governor. And that is extremely powerful because they're able to basically just rig the game. And that's where we have to win, especially in 2030 in states like North Carolina, so that we can retake the majority, so that we can get rid of these gerrymandered maps. I do think that, we will see some real opportunities there because of, as I said, the population change in that state, as well as the fact that they have potentially dummy-mandered themselves through previous cycles.
Do you think that's valid, the dummy manders? Because everybody's excited to see the results of the dummy mander, but are we putting too much credence into this? Because I feel like I've been brought up several times to only be let down. So
I think that it's going to be an uphill climb, and it's not a guarantee that you win every district. It's basically like saying we're going to rig the game in favor of your opponent for all of these matches. We're going to give you a slight opportunity because while, yes, you do have a majority, You just need that entire majority to come out. And that's the thing. We do have a more centralized base that we can kind of activate potentially, where we can, knock doors for multiple different candidates all out of like the same organization. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to see, I think, all of the results go our way. We're just going to have the opportunity to have a number of seats that otherwise would not necessarily be competitive. And that means that money needs to be spent in some of these races where normally it wouldn't. And I think with the depleted cash on hand that a lot of Republicans are seeing, that's going to play a factor.
How much do you think money actually plays a part in getting somebody elected?
So if you have no policy, it is extremely important, because it's just name recognition. That's the game. And so that's how all of these politicians kind of treat it, where it's like, if you can throw out as much money as possible, you'll have as much name recognition as possible, which means that you'll be the one more likely to win the race. And that's the standard conventional thinking. We've kind of gone through things a little bit differently. We've been focusing on, social media, trying to get people out and talking about us in different places. We've been on the ground talking to people. We've been knocking doors and showing up to events, community building. And that, I think, is how we're going to win this race, because people actually look at what we're talking about and say, he's got ideas, he's got plans. They also are sick and tired of status quo and the fact that politicians are trying to buy a lot of these seats. So yeah, if they don't have an option for somebody who's an unbought candidate, I think that they're just going to vote for whoever can spend the most money. But if our unbought candidates can get out, talk to those people, organize effectively, then we will see dividends and results come election night. Do
you have a certain outlet, I guess, social media, in person, interviews on big shows or whatever? What do you think is working the most for you in your campaign?
It depends. It's a multifaceted approach where it depends on where we can connect with people. We're just trying to be anywhere and everywhere.
Yeah, right. Just throw everything out there and see who you can net up.
Because at the end of the day, that's how we're going to win this race. It's not necessarily going to be a strategized plan of we need to get, these towns out or whatever, but it's getting as many people out to vote as possible. If we have higher turnout, I think we're going to see better results for us.
Are you getting opportunities to get on shows, on interviews with news channels and stuff like that? I haven't seen the full scope of where you've been. I've seen a lot of places you've been, but I'm just wondering, like, how many invites are you getting? It depends.
Like I got a call from like Chris Ryan's show today, for example. So I might hop on that sometime soon. But like we've been, on WMUR, I think that we scheduled something in July, if I'm not mistaken. And we've just been, trying to get to all the different news outlets. But even still, talking to folks like yourself, because the audience here is going to be different than the audience at a different show.
Yeah, no, that's true. You need a lot of crossover and stuff like that. Well, I'm also wondering, like, I guess internally, like New Hampshire is a smaller state, so it doesn't seem like we have so much opportunity out there.
The opportunity that we have is the fact that people are looking for something different. I mean, as I mentioned previously, Bernie Sanders won the state twice.
Yeah.
I mean,
Kamala won this state.
Well, yeah, but it's the fact, though, that people are looking for options. They're looking for a different type of leader. And at the state level, they have not necessarily found people that are, I think, there to move up to the federal level, because we don't have a bench. And that's something that I think is a real problem, because when you look at, a lot of these benches that a number of other states have built out, it's not necessarily who has the most money or who has the highest level of name recognition previously, but it's the person who would do the best job. And
yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Your comment there takes me down a fork, because so I mentioned that Kamala won the state, not to detract from what you were just saying, because I know Bernie won, but I was amazed at how many people don't realize that Kamala won this state.
Yeah.
Even though it was just by a couple points, but she won.
She did.
And people are living in a fantasy land thinking that this was a Trump won state. So that's why I point this out. But
yeah,
I really want to talk about what you just said, the bench. The bench, in my opinion, might be the most important thing of all of what I've talked about with everybody. New Hampshire has no bench.
Yeah.
Has no bench on the state level, has no bench at the federal level. We just have a few people that have been doing it, so plug them back in and send them.
Yep.
We need a bench so bad. Oh, wow. I almost sounded like Trump right there. So bad, but we don't have one.
Yep.
So I know in the beginning of the year, people were like, well, who's running for governor, for example?
Yep.
We had no bench. Nobody stepped up.
Yeah.
No
one did.
And I don't want to take away any, who's running right now. That's not the point. The point is we were scrambling for people because there's so many unknowns here. Do you think we change that?
I think we need to. And
yeah, for sure.
This has been part of the problem with our state party leadership, because as I said, it's more about promoting the status quo and the establishment rather than actually planning out how we're going to win next cycle. And that's the thing. We need to change the mentality because we are playing defense rather than playing offense.
I agree. Yeah.
And so by building out that bench, you are actively building out the roster that will help make sure that we can win the next election. And I do think that in order to be effective as a party, we need to help make sure that we can shape that. And it's not necessarily to say whoever, we decide is the heir, but because that's what's happening now. What we need is a showing of competent individuals who are ready to step up for that next opportunity, who are ready to say, I'm the future of the Democratic Party. And that is not necessarily something that we are seeing the state put together at the state level. I mean, it's basically a scramble to find people to run for state Senate, state House. I mean, even the county position.
And just to reinforce that idea right there, the Democrats filled 94% of all the seats going up for election this year. The Republicans have only filled 54%.
Yes.
I believe those numbers are pretty accurate.
Yes. And so they're going to be relying on party filing after that point. But yeah, I mean, we have had a number of organizations help promote people to run for those positions. But for the most part, most people don't really want to. And that's where we have problems because it leads to the same types of people who don't necessarily want to do anything controlling how things are done. And that is where we need to have real structural change. We need people who are going to step up. And it's something where it's going to be difficult. You can't necessarily leave your job to be in the state house, make $100 a year.
I fully agree. Some people are threatening that we should just reduce the number of representatives to, from 400. I've heard at the bare minimum, all the way down to 12. And I'm thinking to myself, what?
12 representatives.
Could you imagine 12 representatives for 1.4 million people?
No, that seems a little ludicrous, I will say.
That's half the Senate.
Yeah, that's half the Senate. Which I have issues with the Senate. But I think realistically speaking, you could cut the House in half and nothing would change.
You think that?
I think that if it was 200 people, if it was 200 people, no difference.
Really?
No difference.
That's crazy. That's crazy because I'm thinking to myself, I want more representatives, but I also want the bench. And I understand the more people you have, the bigger your bench has to be. The
problem is that the resources that are available are being split to people who don't even want to be on the bench. And so they're sitting in, Reps Hall as a part of the bench. They could run for Senate, they could run for governor, they could, but they're not going to. And that's something where it's the highest level of government that they even want to run for. And so that's something where when we're talking about cutting the size of the House in half, that means that we are cutting the resources that we need to spend on these other candidates completely. So instead of 50% being spent on the candidates that are actually focused on doing the work, representing their communities, showing up, we're able to put 100% towards them.
You know what amazes me? the House and the Senate, they get paid $100 a year plus mileage.
Yep.
So each term you do, you get $200 and you get some money for driving back and forth, right? So it's not much. And I know what you mean. Like, you have to be retired, you have to be, you have to be available 6 months out of the year. You have to be available to be in Concord, and that's really hard to do for $200 plus mileage. But one thing that shocked me, and I thought that this Google search was going to land different. I searched how much the governor makes. She makes $163,000 this year. And I'm sure it'll go up for inflation next year. So the governor gets just as much almost as a U.S. representative or a U.S. senator, but everybody else gets nothing. At least for Congress is what I'm getting at. I don't know everybody else's paycheck. Yet, we couldn't get a bench for the governor. If you know that you have $163,000 waiting for you in your paycheck versus, whatever job you got in New Hampshire, I would assume we'd have like 10, 15 people running for the governorship.
Well, I mean, I talked to some of my opponents about this because, I mean, I'm not old enough to run for governor.
Yes, I know.
People ask me, Heath, you should run for governor. You should run for governor. It's like, I'm not old enough. So it's a situation where, some of my opponents, they could have easily thrown their name in for that. And I think that some of them would be amazing, not just candidates, but governors. I
agree with that. But I understood some of their points of why they didn't do that. For anybody that's I don't want to do too much inside game. So for anybody that's unaware, before the filing period, so this is in May, there was an ask that some of the candidates from CD-01 maybe drop out and then run for the governorship. And we saw that in WMUR. I think they asked Carly that. I'm sure they've asked every candidate that, right? I'm sure there was an uncomfortable phone call. Oh, except for you, because you're not 35, I think. Is it 30? Is it 30?
Yeah, it's 30.
Oh, it's 35 for president, right?
35 for president, 30 for like everything else. So for state senate, you have to be 30. For the governorship, you have to be 30. For U.S. Senate, you have to be 30. U.S. House, you have to be 25.
Wait, so you're telling me that in 2030, you're eligible for the governorship?
Yeah, I would be then.
I'm going to start designing the signs. I'm ready to go.
Look, that's under the assumption that I would leave the House of Representatives.
True.
I mean, at that point, it's like we have an agenda that we're looking to enact. Medicare for all.
Yes.
Making sure that we can fight for universal education.
I just want good people leading my state and my country. And
I know. Yeah,
I know you personally, and that's why I can attest that you're somebody I would actually vote for in that position. That. Now, I am glad that you got to wait till 30, though, because there's going to be some brain development, even for you, that needs to take place as a young adult. And that's okay. I still think, like, I've spent a lot of time with you. Actually, I've spent more time with you than a lot of people in New Hampshire. It's simply because we ran together.
Yeah.
And so I got the inside play when we were driving house to house together and going through all this. So I personally think you one day will make an amazing governor of New Hampshire if you so choose to do that.
Yeah.
But I want to see you go to the U.S. Congregation to wait, that's a church, not a congregation. But I want you to go down there.
Yep.
And I want you to change our world.
Yeah. And that's what this is all about. I mean, I've had conversations with, colleagues, other candidates that are running. And, this isn't about me. This is about moving our country forward in the direction that will actually mean real results for real people.
Yeah. And I don't think your name being in the hat is a bad thing for any of us, and there's plenty of great candidates. I don't want to take away from anybody. Just you're sitting in front of me right now. And that's why, I'm directing this towards you.
Well, it would have been nice if my ranked choice voting bill passed, but, that's where,
we need that so much.
Oh, well, that's just one of the many reforms that we do need. But in terms of the path forward, I think that, we need something different. We need to be radically different. And that's where I'm providing a different type of Democrat for people to vote for.
I agree with that. Again, I know you personally, so this is a little bit easier for me. I think if a lot of voters got to have that opportunity that I did, I think they would look at you a little bit different. I think your biggest criticism is you're too young.
That I've heard that a number of times.
How does that make you feel?
How does that make me feel? It's a little comical because at the same end, the reason that they're using my age is to try and say that I'm inexperienced, because in the same sentence, in the same breath, I can turn around and say, but I'm the one with the most experience as an elected in this race. I am able to hit the ground day one and just hit it running.
Yeah.
That's where no other candidate has the type of experience that I have.
I thought that your lack of a college degree would be your main hindrance. I could remember almost 10 months ago that I told you this.
I'm still waiting for it in the mail.
Yes. And that's why I want to bring this up, because I told you, I think about 9 months ago, I said, Heath, you won't stand a chance without a college degree. You just graduated.
That is right.
You just graduated. And I want to say congratulations to you, because you took that and you ran with it. And the only thing that I can think of that somebody could criticize you about right now is your age. But even then, I think your record stands on its own. I think that you're not an unknown. People on both sides of the aisle here in New Hampshire know who you are. I see it when you enter the rooms, when I'm at an event that you're at, and there's a couple other candidates that control the room as well. So I don't want to. Me bumping you up isn't taking them down. That's what I want to make sure that everybody's taken away here.
Yeah,
I just want to see progress.
Yeah,
I want to see a better America. I don't want to see my kids or any other kids being sent to a stupid war like Iran, just so some dude that's in the Epstein files can hide, the fact that he's in the Epstein files at least 38,000 times. Those American lives are value.
Yeah.
They're valued to me as somebody that's retired from the armed forces, but it's more than that. It's everything.
It is. And I mean, these things, they matter. It's just, we need leaders who are going to have that moral compass, because when you see, leaders time and time again use the same playbook to start wars over nothing. Yeah. I mean, still waiting to see where those WMDs are, I mean,
somewhere out there. Don't worry. I've heard a few things.
You've heard a few things. Yeah. I mean, I'm still waiting to, see where all these drug boats are and all the evidence behind that. I'm still waiting to see, the development of Iran's nuclear program. I mean, it's been decades, apparently. They're just weeks away from developing a new missile.
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks.
2 more weeks.
Yeah, got it.
So,
but it's the same playbook time and time again. It's obfuscate from the actual reason that we're going in, create a media storm of drama around this other aspect that is not even based in reality.
Yeah.
And pin the media there rather than on U.S. troops dying. It is sad to see that we have lost American lives over this bullshit.
Yeah,
bullshit?
Yeah, you say it.
Bullshit. But that's where we need a different type of mentality, and we need to overturn things like the authorization for use of military force. Congress needs to do their job, actually vote on these things, and we also need to make sure that the president doesn't have the opportunity to just say, let's bomb wherever. I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, we'll hit a school. It's fine. That was just an accident.
Yeah, he said that we may never find out who did it. Yeah. I can tell you who did it. Pentagon Pete and Donald Trump. Those are war crimes. They should be prosecuted.
Yes.
And I hope that someday they will. And by the way, when I was saying earlier that I hope that we claw back all those ill-gotten gains, that applies to those people too.
Yes.
Like, I want the Trumps, all of that money, all of it, the billions. He's gotten $4 billion richer since he got into office for the second term. All of that needs to be taken back. The jet needs to be taken back, and it should be shredded. That thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little upset.
Oh, you're fine.
Being an American underneath this regime is so upsetting to watch.
Yeah.
All this happen. But I think the one part that makes me the most upset is that there's other Americans that are rooting this on.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's just like, is the president telling you how you should make a Kalshi bet right now?
Yeah, I'll put it on Polymarket to see.
Put it on
see how
Polymarket.
that lays out.
We'll be invading Iran or kidnapping the Venezuelan leader. And it's just
it's insane. I actually have no idea what's going on with Maduro. I mean, shouldn't he be back in Venezuela by now? With like,
so I mean, I don't really know what's happening with all of that. I know that he's being held in the same prison as Luigi Mangione, which is really fun.
Wait, he's in New York, right?
Yeah, he's in New York.
Okay.
And so it's just like that whole situation there, I don't know how we can legally prosecute it because, I mean, the legal system, it's pretty clear. I mean, we're not taking him to an international court. And U.S. law is pretty clear about where jurisdiction lies.
Yeah.
And if a crime occurs in a certain jurisdiction, then the case needs to be held within that jurisdiction. I don't understand how they're able to go after Maduro for alleged crimes that he committed internationally, unless they're trying to do it via like a RICO case.
Yeah, they are. They try to do the whole drug smuggling thing.
That I think is where it's going to like fall flat because it's just like you can't really even like it's not even necessarily New York that these drugs were going to. If there's not necessarily a clear connection between these drug smugglers or whether or not there were even drug smugglers to begin with.
All of this is
it's very sketchy, and it's to me something that just screams out like a little bit of a warning sign and a red flag. It's like we have Iran and Venezuela. Those are two of the countries that we've targeted. Two of the countries with the world's largest oil reserves.
Man, imagine that,
Imagine that. And so it feels very much a situation where we are trying to control the oil market, especially. And it seems to me like we're focused on trying to increase American petroleum production.
We are going to get our lunches eaten by China.
Oh, yeah. And it's just like we are going to get smoked when it comes in terms of like green energy. It doesn't matter whether it's hydro, whether it's going to be solar. I mean, even nuclear energy.
Take your pick, yeah.
And it's just like I know people have some concerns over nuclear energy, but at the end of the day, it's better than fossil fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that nuclear can be done safely.
Yes.
Right? We have a lot of smart people. We have a lot of very intelligent scientists. I mean, maybe less right now because of so many PhDs that have left the country underneath this administration. But overall, we still have a lot of smart people, and we will continue to make smart people.
Yes, exactly. And that's where I do think, when you look at how a number of our nuclear plants have been able to be run, it's like they have been fairly efficient. And I mean, here in New Hampshire, the largest energy producer in the state is the Seabrook nuclear power plant. And I mean, I'm proud to say that I have the endorsement of the IBEW 104 who represents the workers there. And I do think that, it's something where we need to make sure that they have a safe work environment. We need to make sure that we're doing nuclear a safe way, but we are also promoting it as a transition away from the fossil fuels that are absolutely dominating the rest of our energy market.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Being tied to such a finite resource is what's going to really harm us in the long term. So
exactly.
You know who I'm really jealous of right now? The Philippines, believe it or not. And I know this is probably like, what is he bringing that up for? The ICC.
Yeah.
For anybody that's not familiar, I actually lived underneath President Duterte when I was living in the Philippines after I retired. So between Korea and here, I was living in the Philippines and he was the president. I was waking up to those stories of 17-year-olds just getting shot in a dark corner because they had drugs. He killed, I think, close to like 8,000 people with extrajudicial punishment like that. Yep. To see the ICC grab him and Bato, which I don't expect you to be familiar with these people, but for anybody that is, I wish we had that here in America. And I know that George W. Bush and a lot of other presidents were very adamant about not being in the ICC. And I understand that because they are war criminals and they would have been prosecuted as war criminals. So obviously the status quo was like, whoa, we can't let that happen. But watching the Philippines do it makes me think we can absolutely do this.
Well, I remember during Trump's first term when Duterte was elected and everybody was like kind of calling him the Philippines Trump. And
yes,
it's very kind of upsetting and angering to see something like that happen, where it's like, all right, you have clearly committed crimes, and it's like, we know like people here in our country have done the same thing, but we can't go after them in the same way. We can't hold them accountable in the same fashion. And that's disappointing, because at the end of the day, they committed crimes. They did very wrong things that need to be held accountable.
And I think because we don't prosecute, we never correct anything. Like the fact that we did all the things that we did underneath George W. Bush, maybe even George H. Bush, right? Yeah. Like you can go back kind of far on this, and it's all wrong. It's all wrong. It's all harmful. We've never got closure from it. A lot of our allies around the world have never gotten closure. There's just so many things that we need to go back and correct the record, and we have to get the right leaders to go and do that for us.
Yeah,
it's so difficult and it's so challenging. I don't know how much other Americans can stomach the idea of the ICC right now, but I think if it was presented in a way that people could digest it and see the meaning of it, like the rest of the world, we could get on with it. Yeah. Do you see any other way?
I mean, I think that the ICC is an easy way of trying to handle a lot of these problems because, they're international crimes. I mean, Maduro should go in front of the ICC.
Yes.
But instead, what we're seeing is him in front of a U.S. court, because instead of actually giving him a fair trial, we're going to give him a kangaroo court.
Which is awful.
And, it's like, I do think that, you can point to certain things and it's like, you can make an argument. But like anything, we need to have due process. And this presidency, this administration has had no regard for due process. I mean, the 14th Amendment in this country, in our own Constitution, is very clear. Not only does it define birthright citizenship, in terms of people being born in this country having citizenship, but it also defines who has access to due process. And it doesn't say all citizens. It says all persons.
Yep.
And that is very important because we just saw in the same sentence, it defines what a citizen is. And it says that all persons, not necessarily all citizens, all persons are entitled to due process. And so when you have this administration using ICE to detain people, put them in these camps without any sort of due process, that's problematic.
That's I couldn't agree more. I mean, I firmly believe that America is great because of the diversity that we have, because of the makeup of our country, the experiences that we've had, over the last 250 years plus. Yep. It's what makes us special.
Yeah.
I've been to other countries that have like a monolith of the same people, right? Like if you go to Japan, if you go to Korea, they're all Korean, they're all Japanese, but not in the same way that we're all Americans.
Yeah.
And, and you could probably say that about so many other countries. We're very special as being a melding pot. And to see this being stripped out from underneath us is insane.
Yeah. I mean, we're not, a singular identity. I mean, we come from all different backgrounds, all different places in this world. And we have all ended up here. Not necessarily all by choice, but, we all ended up here. And I think that it's a special thing where you're able to talk to your neighbor, talk to somebody with a different background, and actually, learn not necessarily just about them, but also, the perspectives that they're bringing and how that actually improves our culture and our society. I mean, I think that it's great that you're able to go into like downtown Manchester or downtown Portsmouth. And, I'm thinking about like a Nepalese place in downtown Portsmouth. I mean, have you been to Durbrush Square?
I have not, but there is one in Manchester. It's kind of like in the heart of downtown by Union Street. Oh, it was so good.
Yes. Well, I mean, things like that where it's like we are, very uniquely special in the fact that can't really go around to other countries in the world and say, all right, I want to go find some Nepalese food.
Yeah.
I want to go find, some Thai food. Yeah. Well, actually Thailand, they do get quite around.
Well, I mean,
that was a bad choice.
But you're right though. I've been to Thailand and going to Thailand for food is very different than going, to XYZ for food.
Yeah.
So I agree.
Yeah. And so it's very different in terms of like how we approach, our opportunities. I mean, we have jobs that are available here that are not necessarily available anywhere on planet Earth because of the diversity here. Like we have so many different people who are in research positions. I mean, as long as Trump is not pushing them out, which is,
which now that you said something, they're all pushed out. So,
but that's where we have an advantage because of our diversity, because we are bringing different perspectives to the table. When you look at a problem all from the same angle, you might not necessarily see the solution if you're all looking at it from the same position. You just need a different perspective, and then all of a sudden you can see where the gap is.
It's so crazy to me because I think to myself, what would it be like, for example, if the only movies we had that were made in America were just white people or black people or Latino, whatever, It's so interesting to see the different characters. It's so interesting to see the different cultures and the way they play out. And I think it makes it special because we got things like the space program.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I know that's from World War II in Germany, but you can add that to so many other things.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just, the diversity makes America great. And I want that. I want to continue. I don't believe that we need to go back in time. There's no time in America's past where I would say, oh, that's when we were great.
No.
That's the best part about this because we're always moving forward. We're always finding.
Well, I mean, it's like trying to be perfect. Nobody's going to be perfect.
Yeah.
It's just you want to strive to be your best. And that's the thing. America, we have had, little glimmers of hope and greatness. But we are always running to try and achieve that greatness. We are not necessarily there yet. And I think that it's an opportunity where we have to look at ourselves and say, how can we make ourselves better? And at the end of the day, we have to ask, are we better off now than we are 4 years ago? Are we better off now than we were 50 years ago? Where can we make an impact that will actually have a difference in how we are able to move our lives forward, how our kids are able to move their lives forward, how the generations that come after us are able to move their lives forward?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that our greatest opportunities, our greatest achievements, whatever, are yet to come.
Yeah.
We've had some amazing ones. We've gone to the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
We have developed, flight. From just the Kitty Hawk little plane that you saw go 300 yards to supersonic speeds, shuttles, rockets. We've accomplished so much just in the last 100 years alone.
Exactly.
And to be held back by something so stupid, it's just, I cannot believe. All right. I'm going internally. I want to scream. I want to scream into the largest pillow that we could possibly make because I cannot believe that we chose this as our current. I don't know what did this to us. It was just a lot of hate for electing our first black president. A lot of hate for electing Joe Biden. I don't even think about those people that much.
Well, I think that it goes back to the fact that those people who are going to vote for Trump, they were going to vote for Trump no matter what. It's the fact that, people, I think after Obama, they felt, hope, they felt change. But like you said earlier, I mean, with the first 2 years, not being able to get everything that he wanted done and then having to deal with 6 years of Republican control in Congress.
Yeah.
That is very difficult. And I think in 2016, there was kind of a culmination where Democrats had anointed Hillary Clinton. And obviously, people wanted Bernie. They wanted something more progressive.
I was a full Bernie bro, so I definitely, this hits home, yeah.
And I mean, you have states like here in New Hampshire where Bernie won New Hampshire, yet where did our superdelegates go? Hillary Clinton. Well, I'm just making guesses off of the people that I know were super delegates at the time, and
Sure.
the way that they do talk about Bernie even today. It's like, you definitely didn't vote for him.
Yeah, Bernie's such a special person
Yeah.
because not just his ideas, but his commitment to making our lives better. And I don't know. I think like when that time comes when he passes the torch, and it should be really any year at this point, I think we'll remember Bernie Sanders being a good American, a patriot, wanting to do things better. People just can't get past the socialism part, like the democratic socialism part, because it feels wrong to them for some reason. And I wish we can get past that.
Because of McCarthyism, the Red Scare. I mean,
you're a commie. No,
socialism, socialism, communism, all of them. You know, I mean, even still, like, you know, you would have during World War II, you'd have people ask, you know, are you a communist? And, you know, you would have people having to respond by like saying, like, I'm a New Deal Democrat. And that's something where, like, even still, like, that has permeated where we have been so anti-communist that we have construed socialism and communism together in a way where it's just like, actually, no, they're not the same thing.
Yeah.
Like, just because it's a slightly different form of government. I mean, capitalism is, you know, not fully existent here. I mean, people forget capitalism and communism are forms of economic systems.
Yep.
And we don't have a fully communist society anywhere on Earth. And we also don't have a fully capitalistic society anywhere on Earth. It's somewhere in the middle.
Right.
And the term that socialism is that you have a slight tilt towards the people. You provide them with the essentials that they can't live without, things where they can easily be exploited. You make sure that the government has intervention and regulation so that people can't be screwed over. It's really that simple. It's like the free market can exist in terms of, like, if you want to, you know, have a PC, you know, you can go out and buy whatever, you know, parts you want, you know, set the price for these different components, you know, graphics cards. I know they're going up a little bit, but
that's right. Hopefully we'll get that taken care of.
But, you know, in terms of like those options and opportunities, it's like, yeah, there can be a free market there. It's just the areas where the free market breaks down. You need to have a promotion of government intervention so that the people are the ones placed first and foremost, not corporations and profit.
I think you say it pretty well. You know, I think of something like China, right? Communists, the CCP, right? Yet they recognize the power of an economic engine of capitalism. So to some degree, capitalism is baked into their government. So I understand there's a blend. I just wish other people could get the idea that there's one party that represents corporations and rich people. They're the GOP. Yep. They do it. Just look at their bills. They cut the taxes for rich people. There's no such thing as trickle down economics. And then you have another party that, while there is some establishment there, some comfort, rich people with money that want to just be there, I think overall that party is for the people, right? Normal people, myself, yourself, my neighbors, they just want to live. They don't want to be ruled by corporations. That sounds awful, and it is awful.
Well, and this is the thing. People, you know, we talk about the Bill of Rights a whole ton, and, you know, that's supposed to be freedom from the government.
Yep.
And, you know, you look at, you know, a number of the amendments, and it's how can the government stay off of you? What we also, I believe, need is a second Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights that protects us from corporations. Because corporations are very easily able to take that power vacuum and use it against us. I mean, people are trapped in jobs that they cannot leave because otherwise they'll lose access to their healthcare. I mean, we have actually made it very difficult for people to get the education that they need. I mean, I know a lot of people who went into computer science, and now it's like, I talk to a bunch of people, and it's like they're being pushed out by AI. They're competing in an oversaturated job market, and they can't afford to go back to school because guess what? They still need to pay back their student loans. Yeah. And so they can't actually get the education that they need to actually improve their lives. So they're stuck in this cycle of trying to find, you know, gig work oftentimes that is not necessarily going to pay the bills. So we need to come up with ways where we can actually get them the education that they need so that they can actually have the tools to improve their own lives.
Oh, all that is so true with tuition going up, across the board, just the access. You're right, because if people can't afford childcare, if people can do other things, then they have time to protest. They have time to throw a wrench in the system. They have time to run for office.
Exactly.
We just saw that with, was it South Carolina, the Rear Admiral? I may have the rank wrong, but she just won her primary in South Carolina as she was fired by Pete Hegseth and then ran and won. These are the things that we need as a country. And now I heard she's a little centrist, so I don't know her policy or anything. But the fact that she can win in somewhere like South Carolina tells me that there's a bridge being built somewhere. And I like that, because that's the future that I do want to live in. It's a hard world, man. It's really hard to find good people that are going to lead us, that don't want just the power and the money and all of that. So,
well, I will say this, running for higher office, you can tell that it does draw in narcissists.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you already have the money, the only thing you're missing is the power.
Oh yeah, exactly. And I mean, I ran for this seat because people were asking for a progressive to step in. And I believe that we need to have a different type of Democrat. I think that the work that I've done in the state legislature has been very meaningful, and that I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish. And I think that gives me the ability to, as I've said previous, hit the ground running day one, because I already know what I need to do.
Oh, there's going to be so much to do to clean up after all this, to provide oversight, to rein in some of these loose ends. America's not being very well served right now by its current leadership. Yes. I hope people are paying attention to this, because it's an enormous, it's just an enormous wall that we got to climb. Yeah, and we got to do it together.
Exactly.
All right, switching gears, because I know we're towards the end. I really want to talk about Medicaid for all, Medicare for all, just healthcare for all, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter to me. I have listened to all the candidates that are running in your race, and there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum where everybody's like, yes, everybody gets a doctor. Then there's another part of the spectrum is like, yes, everybody can have a doctor if you want one, which to me is crazy, because the baseline should just be everybody has a doctor. Everybody has access to healthcare. None of this caveats, none of this exceptions. I do understand that it'll take a little bit of time to build that system, to transition to it. But ultimately, if we don't get on that, we're never going to get there. Where do you stand on that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, Medicare for all needs to be the thing that we're talking about, because going through piecemeal has proven not to be effective. It's like, yeah, sure, I'll vote for legislation capping the price of insulin. That's no problem. That's not an issue for me. The thing is, it's disingenuous when I have opponents saying, oh, well, I'm going to support everything on the table, because it's saying, oh, the people who support Medicare for all don't. And that's not true. I support Medicare for all. I also support lowering people's healthcare costs by going after big pharma. I think that we should be able to negotiate drug prices with Medicare. I think that we need to be doing a whole lot more to actually fight healthcare costs, but we're not necessarily doing enough by saying, oh, we'll leave everything on the table except for Medicare for all. Because Medicare for all is how we solve all of those problems nonstop. It's like, that is how we are able to make sure that people have access to the care that they need. And I don't think that it is smart to go into a negotiating room and say, all right, I've already compromised for you. Can you compromise on this compromise with me? It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And that incrementalism mindset is complete lunacy, because it's going in with what I've said previously, that same mentality over and over and over again, and expecting something to change. If you vote for those people, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same.
I think that transition obviously is going to take a little bit of time. I think nobody's going to argue that. You can't just show up with day one and be like, okay, now we're on a new system. But the thought to bake that into your answer in any way is insane to me, because people need to know where the stop is.
Yep.
Where does the bus get off? And the bus should get off where all the doctors are, and you don't have to worry about going bankrupt. I read that 5 million people have lost their health care because of the one big beautiful bill, or the OBBB, whatever. Right? At the end of the day, that's 5 million people, probably mostly children, that can't see their doctor. That can't get preventative medicine, preventative help, any of that stuff. So it costs us so much more as a country.
It does. And that's where we need to be thinking about how we can lower healthcare costs by providing that preventative care. I mean, we know Medicare for all would cost us less than the current healthcare system that we have. I mean, our current healthcare system costs $4.9 trillion a year. If we went to a Medicare for all system, it would be about 3.5 billion or trillion. And that is a $1.4 trillion savings.
Yes.
That is a huge amount of money. And we could be spending that 1.4 trillion on a number of other things. I mean, hey, how many vacations could people plan for that? You know, how many additional opportunities would you have to spend time with your kids if you had that money in your pocket?
And then couple that along with you can't take out bigger student loans to be a doctor anymore or a nurse. And they're not even professional degrees, I believe, anymore. At least the nurses are, not the doctors, but they're really trying to screw us over from every single angle they can. Make sure we don't have the people for those jobs. Make sure we can't afford to go see those people to help us live longer. Where was the pride? Like back in the in hundreds of years ago, the average age was like 35 for people. And then we discovered penicillin and medicine and washing your hands before surgery. And all of a sudden, people are living until 70, 80, and some are lucky enough to go to 100. Why are we not cheering that on? I mean, I guess some people don't want to live forever, but I mean, there's a lot of people that could.
It's because of money. I mean, the thing is like with the healthcare reform that like Trump is trying to push, it's throwing disabled people under the bus. I mean, we can thank our two senators here in the state. Appreciate that, Senator Hassan and Senator Sheen. Meant a lot. I have friends who are losing their health care. But, I mean, I know people who are moving to Canada, moving to Brazil because
Colorado just got approval to import medicine. That all of it's nuts. And I do agree with the two senators we have. As just a constituent, I have written them a few times to tell them how disappointed I am on their votes. They have consistently disappointed myself and many other people. I can't believe they folded. They were 2 of 8 that folded on the compromise. And I don't want to relitigate that, but it's been their MO since the beginning.
Exactly. And I mean, I find it, disingenuous, though, when we have leaders in these positions who, parade around disabled individuals. I mean, I have friends who they recorded videos for Senator Shaheen because they were like, thank you for, holding out and not voting to reopen the government and selling out our ACA tax credits because we wouldn't be able to afford our healthcare. And then what happens? They turn around and vote for it. It's like, you can't say, oh, can you record this video for me saying how grateful you are for me, holding out, and then turn around and stab them in the back because those people are the most vulnerable group in our entire population. It's like the disabled population is extremely vulnerable, and people don't realize how you have to live on a knife edge between poverty and being able to survive. It's very difficult for people to be able to earn an income because they have to limit how many hours they work. They have, and this is on top of the fact that we now have work requirements. So it's just like, so you want us to work, but only a little bit. And so it's like, we also then see a reduction in the amount that people get for their benefits. And so they're not necessarily receiving enough to survive while they're not necessarily making enough from their job to fill the gap. And so what ends up happening? They have to either choose between working more so that they can actually get the benefits, from the paycheck, or actually just, saying, well, I need to go without a paycheck and I might not be able to pay for food or rent.
It's all scary because people, like you said, living on a knife edge, they're just one bad election away from losing it all.
Exactly.
And I think it's sad, but I also think that there's no greater set of words than what was said back in, I think, 16 or 17, elections have consequences. Now, at that point, they were happy about it. But I think a lot of people are miserable right now because those elections had massive consequences and nobody was safe.
Yeah, nobody was. And I mean, it's sad though, because I mean, and the reason I bring up the disability community is because like, even still, like looking at the state level, there have been no protections. I mean, the governor, she was going to veto our state budget over 3 reasons. Group 2 retirement, which got fixed. Special education funding in Manchester, which slapped a Band-Aid on. And they also cut DHHS/Medicaid funds. And so we now have an income tax for our Medicaid recipients in the state, which, I mean, you know, Governor Ayotte, I know that you like to say that we are income tax free, but that is a lie. So we need to have a different mentality when we're talking about how rights are being affected by how healthcare is being taken away, because it's mostly the Republicans. But I mean, this is why we need to get rid of the do nothing Democrats, because they're allowing and rubber stamping it.
I think I've thought about this a lot over the last few weeks, and I want to make a pitch to the electorate here in New Hampshire.
Yep.
I moved here in 18, so I'm not going to talk before that. I know a little bit of the history here. We have gone Republican, Free State Republican, and it's just going to continue. Yes. It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yep.
And no matter what you moved here for to New Hampshire, this is harming you and your family. I'm talking to you now at this point. Like, this is what I'm asking New Hampshire. We have elections every 2 years in New Hampshire. So if you don't like what you see, in 24 months, we can vote for something else. But this is what I want. Let's try this once. Let's vote Cindy Warmington, because she's our candidate. There's nobody else is coming to the rescue. That it
Yep.
is what it is.
Yep.
I've talked to her face to face. I've asked her these hard questions myself. We should vote Cindy Warmington in. We should get our progressives sent down to Washington. This state, we should all vote Democrat down the ticket. Progressives are where I'm at. I'm hoping that we can not vote in APAC money. 2 years here in New Hampshire. I want to legalize cannabis, home grow with farmers markets. I want to push the state blue, so that way we can fund education. Yep. We can get some real wages going on, so people don't have to go down to Boston. We don't have to talk about like, oh, we need this rail system to go down so I can get paid. You know, we live in New Hampshire. We should be able to work in New Hampshire. We should be able to get it done right here. We should not have to send our kids out. So all I'm asking is, if you're a Republican and you're fed up even a little bit at the state level, federal level, just go with me on this. Vote progressives. If we hate it, if you hate it, I want to hear about it, and we can have a talk about the next election, and I'm willing to listen. We need to fix things here.
Yeah.
And it's just, and so many topics.
Yeah. I mean, and I do think that it's going to be difficult with how a number of the districts are set, but I do think that we have a chance. I really do. I think that this is a potential wave year. We just need to capitalize on it. And it does partially mean we need to have some exciting candidates on the ballot for November.
Because that's very true.
Even if we just have one, it goes a huge distance to actually getting people to come out and vote. And I think that, you know, there's an energy behind our campaign that is a little bit different than the others.
Yeah.
Because what matters is not getting our Democratic base out. It's getting those independents, getting those people who would prefer to stay on the couch, getting them to come out. Because that's why we lost in 2016. That's why we lost in 2024. We didn't lose to the Republicans. We lost to the couch. Because every single year that we have an election, the largest voting bloc is people who don't vote. And we need to change that. And part of that is Democrats being exciting.
Yeah, and there's more independents in the state than any others.
Exactly.
So it does matter. We really take pride in trying to, you know, be on both sides. We have a long year ahead of us, even if it's just a few more months. We have a lot of moving parts, but I'm really thankful that people like yourself are willing to come on to a podcast like this, a show like this, and have these hard conversations. I mean, I'm not challenging you like we're on a news program, but we're having hard discussions, and I want people to listen. If anybody stayed this long to listen to this podcast, then you're my target audience, and you should subscribe. You should absolutely comment. Tell Heath hi. I'm sure he'll check out some of the comments. We're almost 2 hours in. I want to say thank you so much for doing this a second time with me, being a part of this. And I want to give you the last word, as I usually do. Yeah. I'm going to put your website. I'm going to put links down below in the description, but leave us with something.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you for having me, Adam.
My pleasure.
I mean, we need real generational change to come into this state. And I believe that the campaign that we are building is that change. We are fighting for real basics, universal healthcare, universal education, banning corporations from the single family housing market, trying to raise our minimum wage. Those are really basic things. I mean, I represent a Republican district in the state legislature, not because I'm a Democrat or a Republican, but because I'm a Granite Stater, and I believe that we need real representation that listens to everyone. Please, join our campaign. Follow us at heathhowardnh.com or at heathhowardnh on all social platforms. I really appreciate you having me, Adam, and I look forward to seeing you all at the polls.
Thank you so much. Hey, it's another episode down. Thank you, man. I appreciate you.
Appreciate you.